First presenter today is Danny Searle. Danny Searle was presented previously at Paradox Summit. This is his second presentation, and basically today he'll be talking about the mechanics of Ascension and taking us through some of the information we need to know around that. And Danny is a counsellor, author and presenter. He's worked in this field for over 25 years. He's presented in 6 countries. He's appeared on Australian Story, Today Tonight and A Current Affair. He's featured both in print media and has conducted radio interviews in Asia, USA and Europe. Danny is a psych practitioner combining psychology and kinesiology. He's also published 3 books which are available here today and also on Amazon. His YouTube channel is Path to Ascension and has over 5 million views. So please make welcome Danny Searle.
Okay, Mechanics of Ascension. G'day guys, thank you for coming today. So basically, some of you may have seen one of my books is called The Ascension Guide. That has got to do what I wrote for it, individual ascension. If you wanted to go off tomorrow and learn how to ascend, that's the book. But then I got asked the question, well, what about everyone else? What does everyone else do? Not everyone's going to do that. That's what I'm talking about today. So it's what I call the mechanics of ascension because it covers the actual mechanisms that go along with it. So the first thing we've got to talk about is DNA. Deribonucleic acid. Big word. Everyone sort of knows what DNA is, right? Okay, getting there. So it's made up of codes. A, G, C and T. You don't need to remember all this. I'm just going to quickly go through it. So it's made up in bases, and each pair is joined with A and T and C and G. And then they have a base sugar, phosphate, and a nucleotide. And that's sort of what DNA looks like. Everyone's used to seeing the double helix. It's a structure. It looks a little bit like a ladder. This will all become important later, okay? So junk DNA. Scientists talk about junk DNA. What is junk DNA? They say that 97% of your DNA is junk DNA. That's because they can't figure out what it does. And they've been testing this stuff since the 80s. They still don't know what it is, so they call it junk DNA. So as I said, they don't know what it does. Now we move on to amino acids. So amino acids form proteins, and there's 64 possible codes of proteins on your DNA right now. But here's the weird thing, only 20 of them are active. Only 20 of them are turned on, which doesn't make sense, but it will in a minute. So 44 codes are not active. And nature doesn't waste anything, right? It uses everything. So there's a reason why those codes aren't turned on right now. So jumping now, so we all understand DNA. Now the link between emotions and DNA. Is there a link? Yes, there is. So emotions are a realm that we can't see. We can't physically see them, but we know they're real, don't we? Because you all experience them. So we know that emotions are real, but they're coming from a different part of us. And so what people think is emotion, like screaming or yelling, getting angry, that's just the physical manifestation of it. The actual emotion itself is a vibration or an energy. Do you understand that? It's not a physical thing. The physical thing you're seeing is that. That's the final manifestation of an emotion. Which tells us that emotions are coming from somewhere else. And they have a vibratory frequency to them. So Hans Jenny, this guy in the 60s, decided to do some experiments to figure all this out. And he put medium, like sand, milk, all sorts of things onto tin, and then he put sound waves through it to make it vibrate. And he found that the more he made it vibrate, the higher the frequency, the more intense patterns it created. And the lower the frequency, the less intense patterns, okay? So he drew this correlation between frequency and vibration. So the same thing happens with your emotions. If you have high emotions, it creates a high vibration. If you have low negative emotions, it creates a low negative vibration. So there's basically only two sets of emotions in humans: love and fear. Everything else derives from those two things. Just keep that in mind. So now we're going to look at the link between your emotions and your DNA. And yes, there is one. So when I'm talking about fear-based emotions, I'm talking about these sort of things here. Anger, hate, jealousy, greed, vanity, self-loathing, addictions, manipulation, control, judgment. There's a ton more, but they're just the basic ones, okay? So they're fear-based emotions. So if I say to you, you're living in a fear-based mentality, you're doing one of those things. And same goes, and fear has a long wave. So everyone understands sound waves, how sound waves go through the air. Vibration works exactly the same. So with hate, anger, fear, it's a long, slow wave like that. Okay? Then we've got the love-based ones. So they're compassion, happiness, self-love, kindness, supportive, unconditional love, balance, calm, non-judgmental. Like I said, there's a lot more. They're just the basic ones. So if I say to you, you're in a love vibration, or you need to live in a love vibration, this is what I'm talking about in your daily life, trying to maintain these sort of thoughts and behaviours. So love has a very high frequency, like that. It goes up and down really quickly. So now we've got a thing called the DNA effect. And the DNA effect is an experiment that was done by the Russians way back, late 80s, maybe early 90s. And what they did is they got some photons. Photons are just packets of light. Light travels in photons, okay? And just packets of light. And they put them into a vacuum tube. And as expected, when they tested where the photons were in the vacuum tube, they were just all over the place, right? Like a dog's breakfast, they were everywhere. So then they put into the vacuum tube a little piece of DNA, a sample of DNA. They retested it again, and lo and behold, all of the photons lined up exactly with the DNA, exactly. And then they took the DNA out, and the photons remained in the shape of the DNA, in exactly the same direction. And this is what's known as the phantom DNA effect. So they basically bridge an important gap between the physical and the spiritual. Okay? That's what it's telling us. The physical being the DNA, the light being the spiritual, etheric. That's what it is, right? Can anyone hold light? No. You can't touch it or feel it, but you can see it, right? Etheric. It also tells us that DNA works as an antenna for light. Because remember, when they put the DNA in, the light lined up with the DNA, didn't it? The DNA became an antenna, if you like. So now we're going to jump to the blue star prophecy. A lot of you have probably heard of the Hopi Indian of Arizona, in most of Arizona, in the USA. So we've got the Hopi Indian. Hopi are very spiritual people. They were around a lot longer, or a lot earlier than the other Indian nations in America. They got direct knowledge, if you like, from star people. So that's part of their prophecies. When the blue star Kachina makes its appearance in the heavens, the fifth world will emerge.
There will come a time when a blue star will appear in the sky. Its light will shatter the darkness of the night. This blue star will bring a wind like that which has not been seen on Earth in a long time. The blue star will bring a fire. This fire will be so bright and hot that it will transform the matter of the universe. The blue light from this star is a signal that shall end the fourth world. The blue star will cause the oceans to rise and topple upon the land, flooding the world. All living things will perish in this great catastrophe.
Okay, so these extracts I've taken from Paul Levialat, his DVD Earth Under Fire, if you're interested in seeing the whole thing. Paul basically discovered a message in the zodiac where he found that Scorpio and Sagittarius are the only ones in the zodiac that have arrows or pointing something, okay? So they appear to be pointing out the centre of the galaxy. Okay, do you understand what I'm saying? So 14,000 years ago, they actually lined up exactly where the centre of the galaxy is. So Sagittarius now misses the centre by 2.5 degrees, but it was on target 14,000 years ago. And Harrow Shapley was the guy in 1917 that first discovered where the centre of the galaxy is, but he was off by 3.3 degrees. So what's amazing with that is the ancients were 8 times better than they were in 1917, right? Probably going to get off track here and confuse people. Anyone heard of the Anunnaki? They're the ones that created the zodiac, okay? Long story, can't talk about it now. But that's why, 14,000 years ago, because that's when they did it. That's why it lined up then. So he suggests that the ancients were warning us about a coming catastrophe. Specifically, an explosion in the centre of our galaxy. So the galaxy is about 23,000 light years. That's where we are at the moment. We're 23,000 light years from the centre of the galaxy. And we're on one of the fringe, the spiral arms of the fringe. And you see that at night. It's basically the Milky Way. You've all seen the Milky Way. So that's what it looks like, the rear view, side view and the top view. So we see that real view, the Milky Way, okay? But that's the spiral arm that we're on. So the only time the centre of the galaxy comes visible to us is when there's an outburst, what they call a galactic outburst, or an explosion. And spiral galaxies like we live, they come in 2 varieties. Cepheid and quiescent are the 2 terms that they use. It just means one's exploded and one hasn't. That's all it means. And they're normally in their quiescence phase for probably 80% of the time. But 1 in 6 are Cepheid, meaning they've exploded. So NASA knows about this. They study them, right? They got pictures of them. You can get them on the internet. So yeah, most of the time we're in quiescent phase. So, and it can last for hundreds or thousands of years, but they're always happening all over the place.
The Hopi people of North America have a legend. There were 3 other worlds before this, the present world. Each of these worlds was terminated by a great catastrophe. The Hopi believe that this ending will be heralded by the appearance of Sakwasana, the blue star spirit. Sakwasana will shine brighter than all of the stars in the heavens. These legends promise that one day the present world will also come to an end. And although the blue star spirit brings forth the end of this world, she also plants the seeds for the next one.
So that blue star, you all saw what the blue star looked like. Do you think that looks a little bit possibly like the galactic centre blowing up? Possibly? I think it does. So that's the bluish white light. But the Hopi didn't know that, of course, because they've got no frame of reference. So basically what I'm saying is that what the Hopi were predicting or seeing was a galactic outburst. And it wasn't just the Hopi either. We've got all these different cultures around the world that have very similar things. You can look up yourself. I won't go into them now. But all these texts talk about very similar occurrences where there's a bright light or a flame in the sky, right, that brings about a new world. Now here's the key to all this. When a galaxy blows up, the first wave that comes out from it has got synchrotron radiation in it. It's a special type of radiation. Again, NASA knows all about this. And it's accelerated by a magnetic field emitted by the supergalactic wave, okay? That's what pushes it out in front of it, and then the blast waves behind it. But this is what comes first. The thing with synchrotron radiation, it can penetrate every single level of the visible light spectrum, okay? So everything from radio waves to infrared, visible light, ultralight. So as you can see in that picture there, visible light's just that little bit in the middle. Synchrotron radiation is the only radiation that can go over the whole spectrum, right? It's really powerful stuff. And it's just interesting that it can penetrate everything.
There will be no warning when this, the fourth world, will be shattered by the great fire. The myths say that the fourth world will be destroyed in order for the next world, the fifth world, to begin. These are the prophecies that have been handed down from generation to generation among the Hopi. They are considered the most important prophecies of these people. The Hopi prophecies say that with the coming of Sakwasuhai, the fourth world will come to an end.
So at least one superwave has already left the galaxy. But we don't know exactly when it's coming, okay? Because as I said, it's 23,000 light years away. I don't know how fast it travels. Does it travel faster than light, at the speed of light? I don't know. We know it's left, but we don't know when it's going to get here. But we do know that the Earth has been wiped out several times in the past by these supergalactic waves. And we've got archaeological evidence for that. I won't go through all these, but just to give you an idea, this is how many times in the past that science knows the Earth has lost 86%, 75%, 96%, 80% of all life. Wiped out. They don't know why, but this is why. But here's the interesting thing. You notice it wasn't 100% of life was wiped out. It was close to 100%, but not all of it. That's because what life remained evolved into new species, right? Then we have the Cambrian Explosion. That's what paleontologists call it, because during this period, to give you an idea, you know, where they're digging their holes in the dirt, they find nothing, nothing, nothing. Then they get to this level, they found 13 species in a cubic metre. 13 species, all in one little box, right? That's why they call it the Cambrian Explosion, because they went from no life to suddenly life coming out of the woodwork. They don't know how to explain that, but again, this synchrotron radiation explains it, because new codes were generated. Remember those codons I was talking about before, where we've got 44 that aren't turned on? Some of them got turned on, so they morphed these creatures into new creatures. Because Darwin's theory of evolution only covers very small parts of evolution, where a bird got a bigger beak or it, you know, grew a longer feather. It doesn't explain how we get dogs, cats, deers and pigs, right? It doesn't explain that at all. Trust me, I've studied this. This does explain it, because to get a dog and a cat and a pig, you have to turn on new codes. You have to write new code for it, right? It doesn't just evolve out of nothing. And that's the point I'm trying to make. So now we get on to 12-strand DNA. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of 12-strand DNA, but probably don't know exactly where it comes from. So this is Bruce Lipton. I'm a big fan of Bruce. I thought I'll get him to explain how cells work, because he'll do a better job than I can, okay?
So when I look at the surface of the cell, actually instead of being smooth, there are all these structures like antennas sticking up all over the surface and proteins built into the membrane. And that these proteins read the environment and convert that environmental signal into a behavior. Let me explain how it works. Here's the membrane. Here are two different proteins. I'm going to tell you right now, there are thousands and thousands of proteins in the cell membrane, but I can divide them into two groups. One group has antennas on it. And antennas are receivers, just like your television antenna for on top of your house before cable. When you had an antenna on the top, what was its function? To pick up a signal. And then what happened to that signal? It was transmitted down the wire to the television, and the television converted the signal into something you could see. Well, here's the point. Many of the receptors in the cell have these antennas sticking up from the cell. So if I go back, these are the antennas sticking up from the surface of the cell right here. And what they're tuned to are not television stations, they're tuned to environmental information. It might be glucose, for example. Is there sugar out there? Or histamine. Is there histamine out there which tells me to get ready for an emergency response? Or is there something like insulin which tells me to change my metabolic pathway? For every different thing the cell can see, it has a different antenna. So that means the cells are covered over the surface with antennas for everything the cell can deal with. So the signals come in and are picked up by the antenna, but then they're converted into the behavior by the second class of proteins. There are 3 different kinds. Channels, which are just like olives with a hole in the middle of it where information can go in. Enzymes, which are proteins that cause metabolism to occur. Or cytoskeletal proteins, proteins that change the shape of the cell. So if a signal comes in, let's say a toxic signal comes in, and this is a receiver for that, and it couples to the skeleton and says, it's toxic signal, turn around and start running the other way, then this is the input and this is the output. So the proteins work in combination. Receptors receive signals. Do you have receptors? Yeah. What are the obvious ones? Eyes, ears, nose, taste, touch. Where are all your receptors located? In the skin. So you and the cell are parallels, but it doesn't look like an eye, and it doesn't look like a nose, but its function is exactly the same. It's the equivalent of an eye. If this was tuned to light, a photon of light would hit this antenna, and that cell would respond like an eye and say, I see the light. And once it sees the light, it has to convert that information, and it uses it by connecting to this, and I'm going to show you how that happens. So the input, the antenna, connects to the output, which makes the behavior. Let me explain.
Okay, so did everyone understand what he was saying then? On the cell, there's receptors. He even said there could be a receptor for light. Do you remember back to the DNA phantom effect? What did the DNA do with the photons of light? It lined up the light, didn't it? So, synchrotron radiation. So as I said before, it's created animal mutations, and 90% of all life has been wiped out, right? So it's either mutated or developed into a new species. Now we get back to emotions, how they directly affect the structure of your DNA. Because of the 64 possible codons, only 20 are turned on right now. So there's a switch that turns them off and on, right? Synchrotron radiation can penetrate all life forms. So if DNA works like an antenna for the light is the trigger to switch on or turn on all 64 codons. So everyone with me so far? Yeah? I know it's a lot to take in. This is normally a day workshop and I'm doing it in 40 minutes, okay? So depending on your vibration, fear or love will depend on how many of those sites are coded for. So if you're a fear-based person, you can see here's our strand of DNA. Where the stars hit, there's a few places where it actually hits, okay? But a love-based DNA frequency hits a lot more points on the DNA, doesn't it? So the more points that are getting hit by the synchrotron radiation, the more codon sites happen. If you max out, you get 64 of them turned on. And that's just a comparison to show you the difference between love and fear. So it means in the biological terms, it means you can code for more proteins. That's really what it means, right? So coding for more proteins, more DNA strands, that's what it does. That's just basic biology. So if the person's vibrating in love, they'll be able to activate 12 strands of DNA. So the full set of 12-strand DNA is a digital key. That's what it is. And what it is, it's designed to unlock or boot up, as I like to say, that 97% of previous junk DNA that they call junk DNA, that's actually what I call divine DNA. That's been deliberately buried into your system. I'll do questions at the end, sorry. There's divine DNA, which is basically built into the system, right? But it's been hidden until we get to a point of evolution that we can cope with it or deal with it. And because we're now heading back to the fifth dimension reality, to get into the fifth dimensional reality, you need 12-strand DNA, right? So this is the whole point of all this. And so, yeah, just as I was saying, by booting up your 12-strand DNA activates Ascension. Which, I was talking about evolution before. Remember how I was saying that the past animals evolved into different creatures or different people? We are evolving into what I call as human version 2, right? We're going to become the upgraded version. So it's cosmic evolution. So basically, just to go through the conclusion. So the blue star is what triggers the amino acids. Your emotional vibration determines how many of those codes are going to get turned on. And the more amino acids you got turned on, the more strands of DNA you're going to produce. And if you produce all 12 strands of DNA, you'll automatically trigger Ascension. No matter what, you just will. And this is going to be a mass event, not just one or two people. So the 12-strand DNA is required to activate your DNA and to ascend, basically. So that's the whole key to this, is living your life in a love vibration constantly. That's how you can get through this. That's how you do it. If you can maintain, you don't have to be, a guru. You don't have to be, meditating for 12 hours a day. What you have to do is live your life in a love vibration. Remember what I said before about the love vibration, what it incorporates. So it's how you interact in your life. It's how you conduct yourself in life, how you interact with other people. The relationships you have with people are the whole reason why you incarnated on this planet, right? To have relationships with other people, to work through issues. So it's how you respond to the challenges that are thrown at you determines how spiritually evolved you are. Right? So if you're someone that's reactionary, that's in the fear-based. If you're someone that has compassion and love, that's in the love vibration. Everyone get that? Right? So this is what I'm talking about. So I don't want to get bogged down with this, but the powers that be know about this stuff. So they want to close it down, they want to shut it down, they think they can. So, they brought in these body scanners and 5G, which are basically designed to unzip your DNA. So let's face it, if you've got unzipped DNA, you can't trigger 12-strand DNA, you just can't. Sorry. Can you repair it? I don't know. So it's anything that's terahertz wavelength, okay? So just before I finish, I want to go through the last prophecy of Peter Durnov. A lot of you probably never heard of this guy, but when I came across this, I've been talking about Ascension and things for a long time, and suddenly someone pointed me to this guy's prophecies, and I was blown away. He did this in like 1944, 1945 or something, and he's talking, literally using the words Ascension, and I'll let you see for yourself. Yes, about a month before he died, he gave this last prophecy. So we'll find ourselves today at the frontier between two epochs, that of Kali Yuga and that of the new era that we are entering. The new era is that of all six races. The sixth race will be that of love. A new continent will be formed for it. It will emerge from the Pacific. Everybody will be subjugated to divine fire that will purify and prepare them in regards to the new era. I think he's describing that synchrotron radiation and then the fire that comes after it. You won't be around for the fire that comes after it, by the way, because that's why the light wave comes first. You go, everything else left gets purified by fire. Thus man will raise himself to a superior degree of consciousness, indispensable to his entrance to the new life. That is what one understands by ascension. Some decades will pass before this fire will come that will transform the world into bringing of a new morale. Some decades will pass. So he wrote this in 1944. I think some decades have passed. This immense wave comes from cosmic space that will inundate the entire Earth. All those that attempt to oppose it will be carried off and transferred elsewhere. That's all those living in the fear-based mentality. Although the inhabitants of this planet do not find themselves at the same degree of evolution, the new wave will be felt by each and every one of us. And the reason why I talk about that, I've done talks, I've written books about soul ages. That's what he's talking about there with evolution. It's only mature and old souls that will make it through this process. And this transformation will not only touch the Earth, but the ensemble of the entire cosmos. Well, of course, because it's coming from the centre of the galaxy. The fire of which I speak that accompanies the new conditions offered to our planet will rejuvenate, purify, reconstruct everything. The matter will be refined. Your hearts will be liberated from anguish, troubles and intuitude. But the matter will be refined, meaning we're going to a fifth dimension, right? A new Earth. We're going to be on the new Earth. And this is what he's talking about. And they will become luminous. Everyone will be improved, elevated. The thoughts, sentiments and negative acts will be consumed and destroyed. Your present life is slavery, a heavy prison. Understand your situation and liberate yourself from it. Everything that is around you will soon collapse and disappear. Nothing will be left of this civilization nor its perversity. We're already seeing that. The entire earth will be shaken and no trace will be left of this erroneous culture that maintains men under the yoke of ignorance. The earth is now following an ascending movement and everyone should force themselves to harmonise with the currents of the Ascension. Those who refuse will remain behind in evolution and must wait tens of millions of years for the coming of a new ascending wave. The earth will soon be swept by extraordinary rapid waves of cosmic electricity. If you're in 1944, you have no concept of the galaxy and how it works, or what synchrotron radiation is, you would explain it as electricity. There's not a place on earth that is not dirtied with the human or animal blood. She must therefore submit to purification. And it's for that reason that continents will be immersed while others will surface. It is the end of an epoch. A new order will substitute the old, an order in which love will reign on earth. So just finally, Merkabah. I'm just sort of throwing this in there. As I said, I've written a book on how to ascend individually, personally. And one of the things I talk about there, you have to activate a Merkabah. That's 3 words that are Egyptian words. It basically means the light body is what it is, a Merkabah. And that's what it looks like, okay? 2 pyramids that are interlocked and they spin in different directions, right? And so the one thing I get asked all the time is, oh, well, you know, why isn't everyone doing it? Or where's your proof that this process is possible? Well, I'll let you in a little story. After I published that book 2 years ago, probably about 3 months after it was on Amazon, I get an email from a young lady in Portugal, and she was 24 years old, to say to me that she took a video of her sister who followed my book. They even used Google Translate, you know, because they didn't understand it all. And they followed it religiously to the book. And she said, my sister has activated her Merkabah. This is her 2nd time, and after this, she's going to go, because that's what happens, right? You activate the Merkabah, and once you're happy with that, you then go to ascend to the 5th dimension. So she said, I'm sending you this video, and then hopefully I'm going to also go in the next 2 weeks. So I just thought I'd share this video with you. This is the original video that she sent me. In case you don't know, that's what a Merkabah looks like. It's like a light in the sky. It's a light ship. I put that in there. Remember that picture I showed you what a Merkabah looks like? So anyway, I still get chills when I watch that. So this stuff is real. That's the reason why I showed you that. It's not some hocus pocus. It's not some sort of, wishful thinking. It's time to get serious. You can all see it yourself that the Earth is now changed so dramatically just in the last 5 years, let alone 10 years, right? And we can all feel the shift. We can all feel something's coming. I don't know when this is going to happen, but it's going to happen. That much I do know. So I live my life personally every day now in that love vibration. So that basically concludes my talk. Thank you very much for listening. And if you've got any questions, now's the time.